On the night the sky tore open, the valley learned the taste of iron. Thunder did not roll, it screamed. A blinding white line ripped the darkness from horizon to horizon, and then the earth answered with a sound like a hill cracking its ribs. The people stumbled from their shelters, hands over ears, newborns howling, dogs rigid with hackled terror. In the silent beat after the second flash, as the air burned and the birds fell quiet, a single thought moved through them like the wind through grass. The gods were throwing stones again. He was 15 that year, light-boned, ash-haired, with the watchful eyes of a hawk and a habit of listening to the earth. His name among the hill people was Aaron, which meant nothing of consequence. Names were like smoke there. His mother called him Quickfinger. His father called him more often than not. In the morning, when the last echo of the night's torn sky was a bruise on the horizon, Aaron went alone toward the place where the god's stone had fallen. The scrub thinned as he climbed the ridge. At the crest he smelled it before he saw it. An acrid, sweet metal scent like blood after teeth had bitten the tongue. The riverbed was gouged open, blackened gravel fused into glass. A furrow ran through the white grit where a thing had skipped and buried itself, like a fish diving into sand. Steam still breathed there. Aaron stood above the wound in the world and felt profoundly that something had arrived. He did not think of gods. He thought of the way the ground hummed underfoot, a nervous little tremor that faded only when he stepped away. He thought of the scent that felt like a memory his body had always held. He found it at the bottom of the gouge, a dark mass half buried and pitted like old bone. Not stone. The chip he pried free with a stick was heavier than stone, smoother than bone. It was the colour of a storm. He pressed it to his tongue out of the reflex the hunters had taught him. Taste tells truth. The cold leapt into him. He could taste the world's teeth. He broke a second piece free and then a third. They were hard, but they yielded to persistence and leverage. He had always been better with hands than with words. By the time the sun rose into a white coin above the ridge, he had filled his pouch with dark fragments and skinned his knuckles raw. He slid back down the ridge as the day's heat rose, stones clacking against one another in his pouch like teeth. Back at the camp, the old men made signs against evil and told him to put the godstones back where he had found them. The women stared, and the children leaned in to touch their faces against the coolness. Aaron turned each fragment over and over, feeling the weight, the refusal of it to be anything but what it was. The sparks came later. He was smoothing a strip of willow over a fire when a fragment dropped from his hand into the coals. It should have sat there, black and sullen as river rock. Instead it spat, a little silver tongue of light licking up, and when he prodded it with the stick, a single bright ember leapt and bit his wrist. The pain was sharp and clean. He stared at the coal bed, then at the sliver that had woken. The ember went dark, but the thought it lit in him did not. He waited until the camp slept. Then he went to the edge of the ravine where the potters kept their pits. The potters were half magicians to the hill people, turning mud into stone and ash into colour. Aaron had watched them since he was small, the way they stacked brush and dung and then mounded earth over it, leaving little mouths for the fire to breathe. He built his own small pit, foolish in the eyes of anyone who might have seen him. No one did. He fed the fire until it roared low and hungry. He laid the dark fragment on a platform of glowing coals, then piled more coals over it. He waited, dripped sweat, fed the pit, and waited more. The moon slid behind cloud. The stars returned one by one. When at last he levered the fragment out with a stick, it was not the same. It had not melted. It had softened, only that, but enough that his stone hammerflint smoothed to the curve of his palm could worry an edge out of it. Each strike shook his fingers numb. Each flake that popped free seemed to protest. The metal did not shatter like stone or tear like wood. It yielded grudgingly, as if deciding whether to respect him. He bent it. It held the bend. He bent it back. It remembered neither past shape nor his intentions, only the last command of his hands. The new fragment cooled to a prey animal dull, hardening with a will of its own. He stared at it until the dawn made it plain and ordinary again, lying there with an edge that drew blood when he tested it. He made the edge sharper and sharper still. He cut thongs and split rushes and flensed bark with it. He put it against his skin with the gentleness of someone testing a dream, and it whispered there. It hissed when it met the hair on his arm. The hair vanished. He smiled without meaning to. "You will hurt us," a voice said behind him. His mother stood there, blanket wrapped around her, hair unbound like a night river. She looked not at him, but at the thing in his hand. "You will teach hurt," she said, "and you will not be able to call it back." Aaron lowered the sliver. He was the size of a man now by their count. He felt like a child. "The hurt is already in us," he said softly. "This might make it answer to us." His mother closed her eyes. "Or make us answer to it." He hid the fragments after that, but he did not stop. Chapter 2. Fire Teachers. The potter's pits were not enough. They softened the dark stones, but only just. He needed more heat and more breath. There was a man among the hill people whose fires burned hotter than others, Keta, who had hair the colour of dry pine needles and fingertips permanently blackened. He used bellows made from goat hide, skin stitched to a wooden mouth that could gulp and exhale like an animal. Aaron had traded him a winter's stack of firewood one year for the right to watch him work. Now Aaron traded him silence. "Keep my secret, and I'll keep your clay source from the river, boys." Keta laughed without pleasure and agreed. They dug a small shaft furnace together near the riverbed where clay was good and sand was clean. Aaron did not know the word furnace. He called it a fire hole with a pipe. It rose to Keta's waist, a tube of clay thickened with straw and sand to stand the stress of breath and heat. At its base they made a tiny mouth for the bellows. They dried it for 3 days in the sun, fed it small fires to temper it, and when Aaron could not stand waiting any longer, they filled it with charcoal. Charcoal was not like wood. It was wood's ghost. Light, clean, without the sap that smoked people out of shelters. They made it by smothering a woodpile with earth and clay, letting the fire live slow and secret until the wood forgot it had ever been a tree. The making of charcoal was itself a quiet art. Aaron had learned it the way he learned everything now, by insisting the world show him what it did when watched. They lit the charcoal, and Keta leaned on the bellows, pushing air into the furnace until the coals changed from red to something white and alive. The heat pressed Aaron back like a hand. He grinned against it, teeth dry in his mouth. He slid the dark fragments into the heart of the fire, and then shouldered the bellows himself. The hours were a slow animal. Aaron fed them sticks and patience. He worked until his arms shook, until Keta's curses turned to snoring in the dust. When at last he tapped the clay side of the furnace and saw a thin, bright trickle there. No, not trickle, not yet. When he drove a stick in and pulled it out with a syrup of dull glowing slag clinging to it, he tossed his head like a horse seeing the ocean. They did not pour metal that day. They made something between rock and metal, a bloom of spongy dark silk full of glassy tears that bled out when struck. Aaron lifted it from the charcoal with a forked stick and laid it on a flat stone and beat it while it was hot, and then beat it when it was less so, and then cursed when it cooled to the hardness of a king and would not move at all. He put it back in the fire. He learned the rhythm. Heat, beat, reheat, beat again. He did not need words like forging and bloomery and slag to understand what his body knew. Hot metal listens. Cold metal refuses. He learned to drive the glass out with the hammer's insistence, folding and folding as if he were kneading bread with fists. With each fold and strike, the thing under his hammer rang more like a bell and less like a clod. The smell was like rain on dust and blood on a knife, and the sweetness of wood burning clean. Keita woke and watched. He said nothing at first, and then he said, begrudging as a miser, "You make it obey." "It wants to," Aaron said, jaw set, sweat raining from his chin. "It wants nothing. You want. Want is a fire that eats the man who tends it," Keita said. He smiled in a way that made it unclear whether he approved. When the bloom finally lay on the stone in a bar more or less straight, Aaron held it up and felt its weight pull down on his wrist in a way that made a promise to his arm. "Use me." He cut the bar with a wedge and hammered one end to a rough blade just because he could. He cut the blade edgewise against a flake of flint, and the flint shattered into dust that glittered in the coals. By harvest time, the hill people had iron pearls in their hair, iron fish hooks, iron awls that pierced leather without complaint. Aaron made them for gifts and kept no count. The winter brought raiders from the north, lean men with oiled hair and eyes like slate. They carried spears whose tips were black stone, and in the moonlight as they crouched among the sheep, one raider raised his head to the memory of a dog and saw instead a boy standing with something in his hand that caught the moon and made the heart know fear. Aaron stepped forward, and the raider's breath left him with a sound like surprise. In the morning the hill people counted 2 dead strangers and a line of blood on the ground that was not theirs. The old men made signs. The women watched Aaron from the corners of their eyes as if he had turned into a different species overnight. The children loved him as if he had invented thunder. The word knife became small in Aaron's head. The bar he failed to name the way a boy fails to name desire grew longer in his imagination. He could see its weight balancing back against his palm, its length taking the long step before him, giving shape to the air. He had made cutting. Now he wanted reach. Chapter 3. The Shape of Fear. One evening, over a stew that tasted of smoke and deer fat, Keita asked the question that smouldered behind every gaze. Why longer? Why not 3 knives on a stick? A spear is the arm's arm. A club is the arm's anger. The longer you make a blade, the more it wishes to become a plough. Aaron turned the dark bar he had been worrying between his hands. A spear warns. A spear is honest. It tells you from far away that it means to take your breath. A long blade is a lie. It lets you stand at a distance and still be near. It is a promise that you can close the world with a step. A spear's truth is thrust. I want the blade to be both truth and lie. Keita snorted, but his eyes warmed with mischief. You want a god's toy? I want something the hands will remember after mine are gone, Aaron said. He began to make a longer thing. There were problems, and they came like wolves in pairs. A longer blade wavered like a sapling in wind when he struck it. When it did not bend, it cracked with the silent treachery of ice. The fire did not want to heat its length evenly. Half hot was worse than cold. He tried joining shorter pieces, hammer welding them in the heat. They pretended to be one piece, until they learned they weren't under stress. He learned to make the iron itself better less of the dark glass inside it, more of the sound that rang true. He learned to listen to the tone the bar made when struck. A dull thud meant something trapped inside. A bell meant clean continuity. He sliced open his palm on a day when the long bar sprang sideways on the anvil. Blood ran down his wrist and onto the iron. Aaron cursed and then laughed a little, and then, without ceremony, he rubbed the blood along the hot bar until it smoked sweetly, and the copper scent made Keita turn and say, We pour our lives into our work, whether we intend or no. Let it eat, Aaron said. If it grows strong on me, good. Keita cracked a smile. There it is, want. Teach me not to, Aaron said. Never, Keita replied almost tenderly. A cold man makes cold iron. Aaron experimented with the breath of the fire. 1 bellows was an animal sleeping between pushes. 2 bellows, he taught a boy to work the second, made the fire a heartbeat. He changed the mouth of the furnace, made it narrower, then wider. He lifted it on a stone base to let the wind under it. He patched cracks with clay and ash and goat hair. He watched the colour of heat the way the hunters watched the grass for snakes. Straw yellow was a song. Cherry red was a warning. Orange white was where the iron listened best. He did not have those words. He had his eyes and the memory in his hands. He learned that if he made the iron angry heated and quenched it in water, it became hard as a grudge and just as fragile. If he made it gentle heated and let it cool slow, it took a set and held it like an old man holds a story. Somewhere between there was a temper that made it sing without breaking. He found it the way the blind find a doorway at night, with his palms and patience. He heated the blade until it glowed like the first light behind a cloud, and then let the wind worry it cool. The next time he did the same, and then watched the colours run across the skin straw, brown, purple like sunset, pulling itself thin. He quenched in oil once by accident and learned a new smell that he kept to himself. He widened the blade toward the middle and narrowed it toward the point, as if the iron itself were growing lungs. He left a ridge down the centre. He could not say why, except that the steel he had hammered thin without the ridge had bent like a reed. With the ridge, the blade resisted in a way that felt intelligent. Later he would tell a listening boy that the ridge was the blade's backbone, and the boy would nod as if he had understood something holy. Aaron cut the bar to length and stood with it balanced across his palm. His hand learned where the weight wanted to stay. He drilled a hole through the tongue of metal that would go into the handle by heating and driving a sharp iron bit through, twisting as he pushed. He fitted wood to it, ashwood soaked and seasoned, wrapped with rawhide that shrank as it dried, binding tighter than any knot. He hammered a bronze cap at the end and peened the tang over it until it mushroomed and gripped. He did not have the word hilt. He had the thing that locked his hand to his will. He made a guard, small and straight, of iron a bar that would stand between hand and blade. It was such an obvious kindness to his future fingers that Keta laughed again and said, "A god's toy." Aaron smiled without looking up. A man's hand. The blade was not yet a sword. It was too crude, too uneven, its edge a geography of little victories and little failures. He took a stone and taught the edge the difference between almost and exactly. He pulled the stone along it as if he were drawing river water into a channel. He watched the line of light that lived at the edge when it caught the sun, the place where two planes met so perfectly that the world could not find room between them. He did not call anyone when it was done. He stood alone with it in the evening, the light coming long and low over the ridge. He took 3 steps and cut air as if air had been waiting all year for that moment. The sound was not a whistle or a clap. It was a little silence around the blade. Aaron let his arms fall. He felt the way one feels after speaking a true name, tired and enlarged. He sheathed the thing in leather, because the first time he set it down it bit a stone and scarred itself. He learned respect in that. He learned fear in the next lesson, the one that came in the night. They came again, the men from the north, this time not lean but hungry. They came with more spears and more men with steady feet, and they came not by moonlight but at dusk, shadows thick under their feet, starlings turning over them like smoke. The hill people had watchers on the ridge who ran back with their lungs burning and their lips white. Keta spat and said an old word that meant something like this again. The hill people made ready with what they always made ready. Sticks topped with sharp, stones chipped bitter and tied cunningly, courage fastened to fear. Aaron stood apart, leather bundle in his hand. He felt his mother's eyes on him and did not turn to meet them. "Stay," she said, voice low and even. "I will come back," he said. "That is not the same." He did not answer. There would be time later for wisdom or apology. There was only room now for the animal that lived under his ribs and had waited to be fed since the day the sky tore open. Chapter 4. The Long Step. The first man who saw the blade unsheathed did not see it for long. He saw light, then he saw himself without breath. The second met Aaron's edge with the shaft of his spear, and learned that wood's honesty could splinter. The third chose distance and threw. Aaron pivoted without thought and felt the spear pass him like a thought he had decided not to have. The blade was not heavy in his hand, only present. It did not labour. It made the space around him narrow into intention. The raiders were used to closing. They knew how far to judge a spear's sting. They read bodies the way hunters read wind. That one would break. That one would rush. That one would faint and use hunger for thinking. They did not know yet that this boy with a storm-coloured stick could give death at spear's distance with no throw at all. The first time Aaron cut a spearhead from its shaft in mid-strike, the men around him made a sound as if the air had been slapped. Fighting changes thought. It makes the world small enough to understand. Aaron's world became the length of his reach plus half a step. It became the line of his edge and the angle of their elbows. He found himself moving not away from danger but along it, like a fish whose safety lay in the river's fastest water. He learned something else the long blade allowed, the bind. When another blade met his, there were 2 iron knives among the raiders, hammered flat like pry bars, cruel in their way. His blade caught them along its spine and slid. He felt the stickiness of friction, and used it to turn their hand, to show their wrist to the sky and the truth. The sword became not only cut but lever. Later he would explain it to a boy as if it were obvious. A long blade lets you ask a man more questions than he can answer at once. The fight became a scatter and then a scramble downhill. The raiders learned fast. Men do. They drew back and used rock throws and jabs to test him. Aaron bled from his forearm, from a slice on his ear that sang a sharp song in his head, from a puncture in his calf that made the ground tilt a little. He did not stop. He was not precise any more. He was a noise with edges. He broke a man's collarbone with the flat and felt the jarring through his fingers light up all his teeth. He learned that a blade could be a hammer when it wanted to be, and that a guard could be used as a beak. There are moments when the world chooses a man's story for him. At the bottom of the slope, near the thorn tangle where sheep sometimes died tangled and afraid, Aaron's foot found a hollow and slid. He went to a knee. The man coming toward him was not hungry in the face but purposeful. He had scars that were not new and a calm that was. His spear came like a thought, low, wicked, sure. Aaron could not rise in time. He could step, but not enough. He turned his sword and took the spear on the flat, angled it, let the man's force travel along his edge and off into the dust. The spear point scraped his thigh, and he smelled himself, blood and oil and ash. He stepped forward into the man's calm and saw in that calm a recognition. Invention meets experience. The man dropped the spear and took his knife. He was not tall, but the earth liked him. His feet were good friends with it. He crouched and came in close. This, Aaron realized, was what the long blade had made them learn to do, to come into the place where it was clumsy, to make it a stick. The man did it beautifully. The knife flashed. Aaron felt the kiss on his ribs. He grunted. He let the man inside the arc and then made the blade small, brought his elbows in, turned his edge not wide but tight, used the guard as a hook and the pommel as a stone. He struck with the hilt under the man's jaw and felt the thunk in his elbow. The man sagged as if someone had loosened his bones. Aaron stepped back a single step and let the blade be long again and ended it. When it was over, the hill people did not cheer. They stood and breathed. Breath is more honest than applause. Keita sat on a stone with his mouth set and his eyes bright and angry. Aaron's mother bound his leg without speaking. In the night, as Aaron lay with a blanket over his chest and a strange quiet under his skin, Keta came and sat. He smelled of clay and smoke and some herb he chewed when he did not want to say something. Finally he said it. "You have put a path into the world." Aaron coughed a laugh that hurt. "A path?" "A way the feet will learn to walk even when you're not here to teach them," Keita said. "A way that will lead to shelters not being attacked and to strangers refusing to take the sheep. A way that will also lead to fields burned because someone has a longer reach. You have made a tool that enlarges both mercy and cruelty." "I made a thing that cuts," Aaron said. "What people do with it will be on their heads." Keita looked at him with pity that had no insult in it. "Nothing we make is only what we think it is. It is also what others think when they use it." Aaron closed his eyes. He was too tired for philosophy. He slept. He dreamed of the sky tearing open again, and this time something stepping through. Chapter 5. The word spreads. Tools travel faster than stories, and stories travel faster than men. Before the first winter's snow sealed the passes, a trader from the river towns came with woven baskets, salt, 2 jars of oil, and a mouth that never closed. He saw the sword and offered 3 daughters and all his salt. Aaron said no because he was young, and the dignity of refusal tasted better than any oil. The trader went away and told everyone on the river that there was a boy in the hills who had taught iron to be long and sharp. The river people told the men of the plains, and the men of the plains told the men who lived where the earth burned with pitch and the cities had walls of sun-baked brick. Aaron did not know that his name, which meant nothing of consequence in his valley, had become a small gold sound on tongues a half-moon's travel away. He kept working. He ruined 3 blades for every one he made. He learned to weld edges. The iron from the sky was harder and truer than the iron he smelted from earthstone. The shiny ironstone from the stream beds, the red dirt from the high places that stained his hands. He tried laminating a hard strip into a softer body. Sometimes the weld held and the blade sang. Sometimes it did not and the blade lied to him, and then confessed only when he asked for its life. He learned to listen before the lie. He taught a boy, and then another. He made them practice with wooden sticks first. He learned a rule the hard way that later he would tell gravely, as if it had come from wisdom instead of cuts. Never test a new blade when you are tired or proud. A man came from the river cities with a cloak dyed blue with a colour Aaron had never seen except in the sky's deepest water. He had the calm of someone who knows his place in the world and finds it comfortable. He watched Aaron's work, ate their food as if it were decent, and slept on their ground as if it did not insult him. On the 3rd day he came to the furnace while Aaron stoked and said, "My name is Ishtar. My lord wishes to see your work." "Your lord can come see it," Aaron said, amused. Ishtar smiled with all the warmth of a winter sun. "My lord does not travel. He brings the world to him and feeds it and dresses it in gold and teaches it to speak in ways that please him. You will come." Aaron snorted. "Will I?" Ishtar looked at the blade leaning against the stone. "You will? Because you are not done and we have more fire?" Aaron did not go. Not then. The hill people were his and he was theirs. He could not imagine just walking away with a stranger because of the promise of more breath in the fire. He put the man off with politeness. Ishtar did not press. He left a bronze mirror and a roll of linen that took dye like it had been waiting, and he left words. "If you grow tired of small fires, the big ones are downriver." Keita teased him for a moon. "Big fires," he said, imitating Ishtar's accent to theatrical effect. "Big fires for the boy with the big toy." Aaron smiled and did not sleep well. When the second raid came in late spring, not from the north this time, but from men in reed boats who thought the hills would fall asleep in the sun, Aaron and his boys met them at the river mouth where the water broke into many braids. The long blades were 3 now, and 6 sticks that only thought they were blades. The boys learned that day what the first raiders had learned. Reach is a story you can tell with your whole body. The reed men learned cautiousness, and later, suspicion. They would come again with longer sticks. After the fight, Aaron stood in the water and washed blood from his blade and watched it ribbon away, red making pink, pink making clarity. He watched his face in the water, older than he expected, a white line by his ear that would make a story if anyone asked, and he were in the mood to tell it. He felt a distance in himself that had not been there before, the space between the boy who had found a stone and the man who had made a path. "Go," his mother said that night. Unexpected. She had said nothing when Ishtar made his offer. She had baked bread and made stew and repaired thongs and kept the fire alive as she always did. Now she sat with her back against the post, arms quiet in her lap. "Go see the big fires," Aaron watched her profile in the red-lit dark. "And leave you." "You will return," she said. "You said once that is not the same as staying." "It is not," she said. "But men are not trees. They must leave roots and walk. If you do not go, the thing you made will go without you in other hands. Better your hands." He slept badly and at dawn went to the ridge. The place where the sky had torn open had grown a fringe of green. The gouge was softer now, weather and wind doing their slow kind work. The dark stones were still there if you dug, and on dry days the smell would come again like a ghost. Aaron laid his palm on the ground, feeling for the old tremor. There was none. The earth had learned to hold what had come into it. He would learn the same. He went downriver. Chapter 6. Cities of Fire. The first city he saw was not a city but an accumulation of audacity. Mud became walls, walls became streets, streets became the places where men decided they were different from the world. Aaron did not come to the city like a pilgrim. He came like a man with purpose and discomfort. Ishtar met him at the gate wearing blue again, like a bruise in human shape. "You came," Ishtar said, as if the weather had occurred as predicted. "I came because my mother told me to," Aaron said, which made Ishtar blink. They took him through streets that smelled of fish and bread and old river. They passed men carrying sun-on-poles lamps with oil bright as new thought. They passed scribes under awnings, making pictures of words, putting sound into clay. Aaron looked at the little knives they used to cut the clay clean and envied them their precision. They brought him to a courtyard where heat lived. The furnace there was higher than a man and fed not by goat bellows but by men with arms like tree roots and machines that let 2 men do the breathwork of 10. The roar of it was constant, like hunger made into sound. Aaron stood at its mouth with his lips open like a child at the sea. "You can pour," Ishtar said, gesturing to a mould where bronze cooled skimming over. "You can cast shapes the size of ox shoulders, but you have found the secret of the blade long and thin and mean. Bronze makes fine knives, but a long bronze blade is a farmer's joke. Iron is the way. Teach us your way. We will pay you in coin and colour and land. We will give you a house with a roof that does not leak and a woman whose eyes are clear. We will write your name on clay so that it does not blow away when you do." Aaron stood with the heat on his face and felt profoundly that the world was bigger than his valley, not because of its size, but because of its ambition. He looked at the men who worked the bellows and at the men who moved the moulds and at the men who watched without lifting anything. He thought of the hill people and their one fire at a time. "Teach," Ishtar said softly, seeing the look. "Learn," Aaron said more softly still. It was not simple. The city smiths had iron, but their iron was capricious. Their ore came in richer veins than the hill streams, but their furnaces were tuned to bronze, to heat for pouring, not for beating. They tried to melt iron the way they melted copper and tin, and iron refused like a mule. Aaron showed them the bloom. They scoffed until they saw the bar ring like a bell. Then they watched. He did not keep secrets. That is one version of the story. Another version says he kept one, the way any maker keeps one, not out of greed, but out of superstition. If the world gives a gift, you do not hand it over entire. The truth is simpler. He could not describe all that he did because not all of it was in words. He showed them heat by colour, beating by rhythm, folding by feel, temper by the dance of colours on cooling. He taught them to harden edges and soften spines, to weld a hard ribbon into a kinder body, to make the blades that would not shatter when they struck something harder than a man. He learned from them too, their bellows, their furnaces, their moulds for making the little things uniform. They called his blade a word that meant long knife, and another word that meant king's tooth, and another that meant wind slicer. The scribes wrote the words and preserved 3, and let 20 go to dust. Aaron made blades that were better than his first, and blades that were worse, because now he had time to be proud and hurry. A young nobleman's soft hands, hardened recently by fashion, came to commission a blade. He wanted curls and animal heads. Aaron gave him a piece of iron that cut without decoration and said, "If you want to be seen, paint your sandals. If you want to live, sharpen this." The nobleman laughed because he thought this kind of rudeness was exotic and therefore charming. Aaron sharpened the blade and made a simple guard and a handle bound in leather that had not touched water so it would not swell. He gave the nobleman a lesson with sticks and made him dizzy without touching him with the long blade at all. The nobleman went away half offended and half in love and wholly satisfied, which was a trick only men who made real things could perform. Women came too. No one had told Aaron that women might want long blades. He learned quickly that the city's women had their own weather and their own wars. One woman, older than Aaron by a decade, with a scar on her upper lip that made her smile deviant and interesting, brought him a sack of iron lumps and a question. "Can you make me something I can hide under my dress that can keep men polite?" He made her a blade the length of his forearm, slender as a fish, with a thin guard and a hilt he wrapped in sewn skin so it would not squeak. He taught her 3 moves with it. Nothing beautiful, all true. Cut the wrist that holds, cut the inside of the knee, cut the throat only if the world truly leaves you no other door. She returned a month later with a jar of honey and no explanation. He did not ask. Aaron's name grew. He was both proud and restless. He dreamed of the valley and of the ridge and of the place where the sky had torn. He also dreamed of a blade that held its edge longer than any he had made, a blade that could go into the fire and come out improved, a blade that was iron but more than iron, the way a song is more than its notes. The city had a place where fallen sky stones were brought black lumps, that the priests said were messages from the gods, and the smith said were gifts from nowhere. Aaron's hands itched when he saw them. He slept badly. He woke before dawn, and went there and stood with his palms on the rock, and had the sensation of a dog finding a scent that makes sense of a week. "Do not," Ishtar said from behind him, amused and resigned. "If the priests see—" "They will not," Aaron said. He took a piece of the sky and fed it to the city's fire. Chapter 7. What the Sky Gives. Sky iron was different. He had known it in the hills without words. In the city he had words enough to tell the difference and still felt word poor. It was tighter grained, as if the wind had hammered it on its way down. It did not spit as much when heated. The slag glass that forms in the belly of iron when earth puts sand into it was less. It hardened faster and at lower heats. It took a polish that made men around it shut up and stare. He made a blade with a sky spine and earth sides, a hard, proud heart and gentler flesh around it. He welded them with a heat that sang white, and a hammer that learned to be lighter and quicker than pride prefers. The weld held. He drew it out thin and then made it thick again and then thin, and let the shape tell him what it wanted to be. He tempered it with oil and then with air and then with a swamp water he had not known existed until the city taught him the place where weeds rot sweet. He watched the colours run and caught them at the right taste. The first cut he made with it was not on a man but on a bundle of reeds bound tight. The blade did not notice the reeds. He cut a bronze rod. The bronze squealed and surrendered. He cut a little branch of olive and the tree did not seem to mind, which Aaron took as apology and rubbed the cut with oil. He named this one. He had not named the first. He had laughed at men who named sticks. He named this one because to pretend that it was just iron was to be dishonest with himself. He called it River Through Rock in his own language, which sounded to city ears like a hawk's call. Word of this blade went to men Aaron did not know. One of them was the king's general, a man named Hamet, whose face was wide and whose hands were like paddles, and whose eyes were the careful brown of a man who reads before acting. Hamet came with 5 men and spoke to Aaron like a peer, which was the fastest way to turn Aaron into a simple man with simple answers. You have made a thing that cuts, Hammett said, holding river through rock with the respect of a farmer holding a newborn. I have men who move in sand like fish in water. I have men who throw spears with more honesty than priests tell the sky's truth. I have bronze knives that have tasted foreign blood and did not grow sick. I want long blades for my men. Aaron swallowed his instinct to say no. Find your own fire. He thought of the hill people, who would meet men like Hammett's men one day whether he helped or no. He thought of Ishtar's warning that if he did not teach his way, others would teach theirs, and he would not like that way. He said, I will make 6. You will send me men who can learn to move with them. Hammett nodded. I will send you men who will break nothing and stay when it is boring. Good, Aaron said, and meant it. The 6 men came. They were quiet, which pleased Aaron. He taught them with sticks first and then with blunted iron. He learned their footwork and made it longer. He learned their habit of throwing and made them abandon it with the blade. He taught them the bind and the lever and the cut that was also a pull. He taught them to move their hips like dancers, which made 3 of them smile and 3 of them glare and all 6 of them better. He learned from them the quiet step in sand and the way to make breath small so it lasts. He made the 6 blades to the same length and weight within a goat hair's difference. He made handles to fit each hand. He measured from the base of the palm to the tip of the longest finger and wrapped accordingly. He felt the strange intimacy of making tools for men whose lives might end at the edge of those tools. He slept badly and sharpened well. They took the 6 blades away. Aaron stood in the heatless light after sunset and felt like a tree that had had something big tied to it and then cut free. He went to the place where the city kept its fallen sky and laid his palm there again. It was warm from the day. He thought of the first night on the ridge when the ground hummed under his feet and felt a desire he did not have a name for become either a prayer or a promise. Chapter 6. The Price of Edges. Hammett's men returned 2 months later. 2 were missing. 4 had new scars and the kind of quiet that follows use. They gave Aaron news without drama. The blades had done what he had claimed. They had confused men who thought a spear answered every question and ended arguments quicker, which was a kindness in the ugly arithmetic of men. They had also broken. 2 had on hard strikes against bone and stone in the same breath. Aaron received this without denial. He had known it the day he had struck the bronze rod for pleasure. He had thought, it will be bad to be this blade on a bad day. He took the broken pieces and examined the grain. He could read it now the way older men read faces. He saw where the weld had not married, where the hard heart had sulked in the soft body and then punished both. He nodded to himself the way a man nods when someone he did not like nonetheless tells a truth he needed. He made the next blades with less hard heart, more forgiveness in the spine. He accepted that any tool that did great work would also do great harm if asked to do the wrong job. He wrote this lesson on a piece of clay with a stick because he had learned to envy the scribes. Then he wiped it away because writing where he came from was for counting sheep and remembering who had given which girl to whom. He kept it in his head instead, and in his hands most of all. Ishtar came with his blue and with a new set of words. The king would like you to come for dinner. I am not a thing to be shown on a platter, Aaron said, annoyed mostly because he would go. The king sat under a canopy that made shade taste like a drink. He had eyes like a man who watched fast-moving water. He was not fat, which impressed Aaron. Men who do not fear hunger often become careless with their bodies. The king asked Aaron about heat and bellows and ore. Aaron answered without flattery. The king asked about the hill people. Aaron answered less. You have made a path, the king said, echoing Keita without knowing it. What will you do when others walk it faster, when they bring carts to it? Walk differently, Aaron said, or leave the path and go into the scrub. The king smiled. Good. Men who cannot leave their own ways die in them. I would like 20 blades by spring. I am not a tree that bears fruit because you look at me, Aaron said. I can make 8 well, 10 if you give me time and quiet. You will have neither, the king said, and laughed. Aaron made 10. He slept less and bled more. He burned his forearm when a slag bubble burst and spat. He cursed loud enough to make Ishtar's boy drop a pot. He healed with a scar that made a map line across muscle and taught him that pain does not ask permission. He worked in the full knowledge now that for every blade he made there would be a man whose hand would find the edge honest or hateful. He spoke kinder to his boys. He did not soften his standards. If a blade rang wrong, it went back into the fire without explanation. In his restless few hours of dark, he dreamed of the valley and his mother, and the way the potter's pits breathed, and of Kita's hands lifting a cup to drink and saying the old man things he said. He dreamed also of someone he did not know yet, someone who would take what he had made and make it better or worse, or merely different in a way that would either please or irritate him, and he woke with the understanding every maker learns if he lives long enough. Your work leaves you and meets other minds, and those minds are your children and your judges both. Chapter 9. Return to the Ridge. He went home before the next winter because if he did not, he feared the city would fix his shape and he would become smooth in ways that would sadden him. He went with gifts, copper beads that were too shiny, a clay tablet with a mark on it that meant his name to men who needed marks, and 3 blades wrapped in linen like bread. The ridge had grown back the scrub that this time of year turned everything silver green at dawn. The hill people were themselves, suspicious of change, quick to laugh when it was safe, quicker to hunch their shoulders against new things that might be monsters. Cater was older. His hair had thinned to the point that the sun could find his scalp and burn it. His laughter was unchanged. "You smell like city," Cater said, hugging him with the arms that felt like rope and sticks. "You smell like goat," Aaron said, swallowing a sudden spill of joy. His mother held his face and looked at it with the way only mothers look like reading a story that has been written with a stick on moving water. She nodded and did not say that he was thinner and that his eyes were more tired and set deeper. He pressed his forehead to hers and let the smell of ash and sweat and the particular river mud of home tell his chest that it could be soft for a breath. He showed them the blades. He gave one to Kita, who held it as if it might hate him. He gave one to a boy who was not a boy now. He put the 3rd into the hands of a woman whose husband had been the first man Aaron had killed. He did this because it was hard and because hardness matters. She took it without trembling. He taught her the 3 honest cuts and the way to keep the blade oiled and sheathed and out of reach of children. There were words for apology and forgiveness in their language. They were not the same words. They used none of them. They stood near one another and let the new weight in her hand be the thing they spoke through. That night, as Aaron sat by the potter's pits breathing that breath from childhood, Kita came and put a hand on his shoulder. "Does the city make you better or just more?" "Both," Aaron said. "It makes me faster at the things I would do anyway. Some of that is good. Some of it is sharp." Kita grunted. "Men like you do not need help being sharp." Aaron smiled into the fire. "No, but the edge dulls if you do not work it." "True, but if you never let it rest, it snaps." They sat in companionable disgust with truth. After a while, Aaron said, "When I am gone, boys will make blades here. Teach them to respect heat." "I will teach them to respect you less," Kita said, and Aaron barked a laugh. "Good," Aaron said. "Never worship men who make long knives." "Never worship men, full stop," Kita said, and spat into the fire to show the gods he was joking. Aaron went to the ridge at dawn. The place where the sky had torn was ordinary now in the way old wounds become part of the body that carries them. He found a small piece of dark iron in the dirt and rolled it in his palm. He thought of the city's piles of sky stone and of the way the priests tried to own the fallen. He thought of ownership, of hands and their claims, of the vain notion that a man can own the sky. He put the piece in his pouch. He felt like a thief and a priest and a child all at once. He left offerings even though he did not know to whom, a little bread, a little salt, 3 words whispered that meant thank you and sorry and watch me. Chapter X. The Quiet. Between blades. Years have the habit of passing, and they do not ask a man whether he is ready. Aaron found that his hands became as clever as they would ever be, and then began slowly to trade cleverness for understanding. It is not the worst bargain. He made blades that were not as perfect as the ones a boy with no sense of his own mortality would make, but they were kinder, which is another way of saying they broke less and killed more wisely. He made fewer of them. He sent more boys to the city, and he sent more iron to the hill people. He watched Keita die in a way that made other men less afraid to die, which is a gift almost as fine as a blade. The city changed names the way river bends change shape. Kings sat, and then unsat. Ishtar went grey, and still wore blue. Hammett grew thin, and then absent, and men with different footwork took his place. Aaron made blades across 3 kings, and never learned the names of their gods because the gods did not care who made edge and who bled on it. He learned instead the names of the boys who came to learn and the girls who came in the afternoon to watch, and the old men who came at night to argue and drink and pretend that the world would pause if they said the right words. He did not marry in the way the city called marriage. He had a woman in the valley and then he did not, and then he had another who taught him the city's dances and then he did not. He had a son he loved, and a daughter he envied for her way of climbing walls. He gave them both sticks early and iron later. He did not force, because forcing makes bad hands. He insisted, because insisting makes good habits. He named 3 more blades. He did not pretend any more that naming was foolish. One was for a man who moved with it so honestly that the blade seemed to vanish, and only the consequences remained. He called it bare truth. One was for the woman with the scar, who needed something a little shorter. He called it thorn in cloth. One was for himself, and he did not say its name out loud. With age his dreams were less of tearing sky and more of water going patient places. He dreamed of the long blades after him, curved like a moon, straight like a path, notched like a saw, wavy like heat blades that would carry the long step to other continents and other tongues. He had not words for continents or tongues plural. He had pictures in his head of men in snow, men in jungles, men under stars he would never see, all learning that reach changes conversations. He also dreamed of ploughs. He dreamed of the first time a man cut the earth with iron, and the earth did not break the tool. He dreamed of the first time a woman cut her own tether with a thin blade and walked into a street where the sun did not ask questions first. He dreamed of shepherd boys cutting ropes, and city guards cutting taxes, and kings cutting their fingers on their own toys. He woke with tears sometimes and did not mock himself, because age takes mockery and leaves gentleness when it is kind. Chapter 3, The Long Shadow. The story of the first man who forged a sword is not a story of a single man or a single blade. It is a story of heat and breath and wanting, of men repeating what hands teach until the thing they repeat becomes a culture that outlives them. The first time a boy who had never met Aaron picked up a blade made by a man who had learned from a man who had learned from a man who had watched Aaron with sticks, that is when the story left the valley and the city and became the world's. The first time a woman used a long blade to cut bread and then cut a rope and then cut a story in half to make it fit her life, that is when Aaron's path became a road. There were men who made longer blades and faster blades and blades with backs like fish and bellies like boats. There were men who learned to harden only the edge and leave the spine kind, men who folded iron 20 times and called it a prayer, and men who snapped their blades on purpose to learn where they lied. There were men who married iron to charcoal in small furnaces that breathed like animals, and made steel that was not an accident any more. There were men who learned that a curved blade makes a different promise than a straight one. There were men who learned to make patterns in the steel like water, and called it damask or woots, or a word that meant the same thing in a mouth Aaron would never kiss. Aaron did not live to see it. He lived to see one more raid men from the mountains this time, laughing the laugh of men whose stomachs were full and minds were bored, and he lived to see the blades meet them in a field of yellow grass. He did not swing his own. He stood and watched and corrected boys' feet with a look, He smelled blood and heard the wind sound like a woman's dress and thought, "That's right, it is all one song." After, he walked the field and counted the living. He did not count the dead. He went to the ridge and laid his palm on the weathered dirt. He did not expect tremor any more. He felt steadiness, which is not so different if a man's heart is trained to it. He sat with his back to a stone and the sword he had not named across his knees. He stroked its spine like one might calm a dog. He said quietly, "I'm sorry, and you are welcome, and it is done." There is a way that old men set their jaw when they are done arguing with their work. He set his jaw like that then. He stood, because sitting is not how men like him ended things, and he went down the ridge to the fire that wanted breath.